What is this disease called cancer? What is this disease that knows no color, race, age, or social standing?
It's true, they are bad. And it's not only X-rays that are bad. In our homes, we have microwaves, radios, TVs, and they are all emitting a type of radiation, what we call electromagnetic radiation. Even the mobile phone that you keep on holding on to all the time, that mobile phone can actually cause some type of cancer.
Well, good evening to you. Great thanks for joining us. This is Channel 1 News Hour. Now, tonight, the country continues to roll in anger following revelations of a possible loss of 10 billion shillings at the National Youth Service. This, of course, follows yet another unresolved matter of the loss of 1.8 billion shillings about 2 years ago. Should heads roll?
What really is happening at NYS, and that is what is forming the basis of our opinion poll question tonight, where we're asking you, should those adversely mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside? Should those adversely mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside? Well, send us your feedback on the numbers 22162. Let us know who you are and where you're texting us from. On social media, Twitter, you can talk to us at KBC Channel 1, my Twitter handle at Katwa Cheng, and of course for John at J Curious. Should those adversely mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside? That is the question tonight. Absolutely.
And of course, we'll also be focusing on that matter in our interview segment, but most importantly, the disaster management in this country following the Solai tragedy, as well as, residents of Tana River and other coastal counties being swept away by floods. Has this country ever had a plan in terms of disaster management? We speak to the right person, government spokesperson Eric Kiraide, who is with us here tonight, and that will be the focus of our conversation, disaster preparedness as well as that NYS scandal. Don't go too far.
Well, now it's time for us to focus on what's coming up in the highlights.
I think the investigations will be complete, and we shall share it with the public and ensure that those who are responsible take responsibility.
Solai Dam tragedy.
Calls for support reverberate in Solai as number of fatalities in the Patol Dam tragedy continues to soar.
So we want to call on the ESCC, the DCI, to speed up those investigations. We want to see people being arraigned in court to answer to these charges.
Unmasking the faces of graft.
Pressure mounts on architects of an alleged multi-million shilling scam at the National Youth Service.
This an automatic 50-50 sharing would imperil the marriage institution. It could give opportunity to a fortune seeker.
And matrimonial property.
High Court dismisses petition seeking to have spouses share matrimonial property equally in the event of divorce. My name is John Jacob Curia. A warm welcome to this bulletin.
Well, my name is Catherine Achenga.
Our sign language interpreter tonight is Steve Dunde. Let's get right on.
Well, we begin with the sad events that are taking place in Solai, where the death toll from the Solai Dam tragedy has climbed to 46 after the body of an 8-year-old boy was recovered earlier today amid fears that more bodies could still be trapped under the debris.
The recovery coming as the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Mohammed Haji, and the Senate Committee on Security toward the site of a tragedy to review the status of the ongoing search and rescue efforts amid allegations of inaction by authorities.
While Brenda Zederadido now reports.
5 days after the Batel Dam burst its banks, leaving in its wake a trail of destruction. Uneasy calm has returned in the area as residents tried to pick up the pieces. But amid the zeal to reconstruct their lives, fears that more bodies could be trapped at the extreme part of the West Patel farm after one more body was recovered earlier today, bringing the death toll to 46.
Post-mortem has commenced today for the bodies at the regional referral hospital. We have a team of doctors that was assembled last evening so that they can expedite the process.
The Senate Security Committee, which told the Solai village to review the status of the ongoing multi-agency search and rescue operation, calling on the government to move swiftly and resettle the victims.
We are concerned that any time there could be some outbreak of diseases, so it is not conducive for them to continue staying here. The government should find a way of dispersing them as soon as possible.
Must shift our focus to permanent settlement, to making sure that these people are settled. Now, I also am aware that a lot of those who passed on were employees of the farm, the Patel farm. I would also want to know what is it that the employer has in place for these people who are affected by the disaster.
The committee, led by its chairperson Yusuf Haj, further calling for a thorough probe into the incident. Kenyans will, however, have to wait a little longer to get a picture of what could have happened, with the Director of Public Prosecution, Nordin Mohammed, saying the Inspector General of Police will be tabling a report on the probe within the next 2 weeks.
Several statements have been taken and we expect more. And in due course, I think once the investigations are complete, then we shall establish whether there is culpability here and therefore charge the people who should have been charged for either negligence or whatever else we find.
Already, the Naivasha Professional Association has drafted a bill on disaster preparedness that is set to be presented to the County Assembly of Nakuru. The private members' bill aims at creating a disaster preparedness committee to handle emerging disasters, address the challenges and help the county plan on such occurrences.
At the county level, we don't have a bill or an act that spells out how similar tragedies or disasters can be managed. So as an association, we have prepared a draft bill that we shall be forwarding to the Assembly.
An interdenominational service for the Solai victims will be held on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the National Environment Management Authority has issued a 7-day notice to owners of dams within Laikipia County to prepare a status report on the conditions of dams within the area to assess and prevent the possibility of a similar disaster. Brenda Zeda Radido, Channel 1 News.
Now, the Orange Democratic Movement Party, ODM, wants the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, to move with speed and investigate the alleged 10 billion shillings loss at the National Youth Service.
Now, ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna says the party will put pressure on those adversely mentioned with the aim of bringing those culpable to book.
It could be a scandal of huge proportions that, if proven, could rival the infamous Anglo-Leasing scandal. The loss of 10 billion shillings allegedly paid to shadoway companies and individuals 2 years after another scandal at NYS that still remains unresolved. 1.8 billion shillings lost in a scandal that saw the exit of former Devolution CS Anne Waiguru, PS Peter Mangiti and former NYS Director General Nelson Githenji.
Following my doctor's advice, requested His Excellency the President to relieve me of the responsibilities of Cabinet Secretary, Devolution and Planning, and should he find it fit to accord me such lighter duties as he shall deem appropriate.
The Orange Democratic Movement now wants the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the Director of Public Prosecutions to move with speed and investigate as well as prosecute the culprits involved in the alleged scam. ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna says it will be applying pressure on authorities to ensure that all those involved in the scandal are prosecuted.
We would like to make clear that whether they be in ODM or in any other party, we as a party will not shield anyone who is engaged in corruption, and in fact will be at the forefront of outing such people, because we are trying to build a new country, we are trying to build a new nation, and this scourge has to be brought under control.
The party also wants the joint secretariat formed by President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga to steer the Building Bridges initiative to come up with strategies of stemming corruption and propose punishment for public officers engaging in corruption.
We want to say that as ODM, handshake or no handshake, we will not stand by as people continue to loot the resources of this country. We want the 14-member team to propose very strict, stringent measures that will see us protecting our resources as a country from those who have made a habit of every time digging into the national purse.
EFCC and the police are conducting separate investigations on the said scandal, with several senior government officials said to have been questioned over the matter. Well, that's the question, or rather the story that leads us to a big question tonight, our engagement with you, and that is as regards the ongoing, or what is called the alleged scandal at the National Youth Service.
Well, tonight we're asking you an opinion poll question. Should those adversely mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside? Should those adversely mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside? The SMS line 22162. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to leave a brief comment, as well as let us know who you are, where you're texting us from. On Twitter, you can talk to us at KBC Channel 1, my Twitter handle at Katwaching, and of course for John at JCuria.
Absolutely, keep them coming. Do you think those adversely mentioned should immediately step aside? Talk to us. We'll be sampling them in the course of this bulletin, as well as the detail end of this news broadcast. But like again, I said, we have Eric Kiraitha, the government spokesman, in studio. Perhaps he could tell us the next course of action that is being taken by government. But in the meantime, Labour and Social Protection Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani says the government has tabled a counter offer to striking lecturers as the government moves to resolve the industrial strife that has dragged for over 2 months now.
And with the lecturers' union threatening to escalate the crisis, Yatani appeared to throw the ball straight back, saying that conciliators appointed by the Labour Relations Court to arbitrate on the matter will be tabling their report in court tomorrow.
Solidarity forever! Solidarity forever!
Lecturers' unions had on Saturday declared that the strike will continue after they failed to resolve the crisis during a meeting with members of university councils, a threat that only acts to escalate the back and forth between the government and striking lecturers, which has characterized the last 74 days. Labour Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani saying that the government has tabled a counter-offer as it seeks to resolve the dilemma revolving around 2017-2021 collective bargaining agreement, where the striking lecturers are demanding 38 billion shillings. Ukur saying the court has already pronounced itself that the strike was illegal, calling on lecturers to go back to classes as antagonists in the pay row seek a resolution to the crisis.
We are also happy to announce that the Ministry of Education, the employer, has given a counter offer, which we hope that maybe in the course of the day a decision will be made for them to accept or to dispute, and then the court will make a decision on the matter tomorrow.
Yatani adding that conciliators appointed by the court to arbitrate on the matter will be tabling their report in court tomorrow.
A conciliator has been appointed by, I have been directed by court to appoint a conciliator. The conciliator has been undertaking taking them through, the mediation process. It is ongoing and is actually concluded, and the report will be filed tomorrow in court.
Meanwhile, the Labour Cabinet Secretary says the government is engaging industry stakeholders to ensure the recent 5% minimum wage increment by the government does not negatively affect local industries.
And our role as a government is to provide a facilitative platform so that industries are helped to grow the economy and to also reduce on the cost of production.
So discussions have been very healthy, I would say, and this week is about execution. That's why CS was the first one to take the meeting after the PRT we had.
And now the High Court has thrown out a petition that sought to have spouses share matrimonial property on a 50-50 basis in the event of a divorce.
Justice John Mativo in his ruling said, although the Constitution recognizes equality between a man and a woman in marriage, matrimonial property should not be a loophole that will be exploited by fortune seekers to reap where they did not sow.
Well, Ben Chuba has the full details.
Barely 48 hours after the Supreme Court declined to make a determination in an alimony case by a British couple living in Kenya, citing it lacks jurisdiction, the High Court has delivered judgment rejecting an appeal by Federation of Women Lawyers to have the Matrimonial Properties Act declared unconstitutional. In the landmark ruling delivered by Justice John Mativo, matrimonial property can only be shared on the basis of individual contributions.
The Act recognizes monetary and non-monetary contribution, which is clearly defined by providing that a party works out with his or her entitlement based on his or her contribution. The section entrenches the principle of equality in marriage. It is my conclusion that the bill section does not offend any of the provisions of the Constitution as alleged, nor does the section contradict any of the provisions of the Act. Having so concluded, I find it odd that the petitioner does not qualify for any of the relief sought in this petition. In the circumstances, I dismiss this petition with no orders as to cost.
The ruling presents a legal setback to FIDA, who sought the removal of Section 45, subsection 3 of the Marriage and Property Act to allow spouses to share wealth on a 50-50 basis, regardless of their contribution. He ruled fortune seekers could exploit the law for their selfish gains.
The interpretation preferred by the petitioner, in my view, is an open invitation to this court to open the door for a party to get into a marriage and walk out of it in the event of divorce with more than they deserve. The law recognizes equal worth and equal importance of the parties in marriage. Thus, the beneficial share of each spouse as the law on the division of matrimonial property stands in Kenya ultimately depends on the parties' proven respective proportions of financial contribution, either direct or indirect, towards the acquisition of the property.
The organization argued there has been a failure to recognize or reward a spouse whose contribution to the family has been performing household chores, bearing and raising children, or a spouse who uses his or her resources for the day-to-day expenses.
I am clear in my mind that the drafters of the Act were conscious about this, hence the clear definition of non-monetary contribution in the Act. The essence of this provision is that courts will evaluate the interests of the parties and the property and make a just and equitable distribution of the property or properties.
Meanwhile, the wife of slain Gathunguri secondary school head teacher Sam Imbogo, alongside two other suspects, were arraigned before a Murang'a court in connection with this murder. The two, however, did not take plea and will remain in police custody until 28th of May, when the case will be mentioned. And finally, Bobasi Member of Parliament Innocent Obiri has been arraigned in Kisii Court and charged with incitement and damage to property in two separate cases. In the first offence, he was released on a cash bail of 50,000 shillings and 100,000 shillings on the second charge. The cases will be heard on 29th June 2018. Ben Chumba reporting for Scales of Justice.
The ruling is landmark, and I'm sure it is going to unsettle some quarters in this country. And it's a conversation that is likely to be with us for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, Catherine.
And it is the discussion that I'll not have with you right now.
Yeah.
Let's shift focus to Rwanda, where Burundi's ruling political party has defended plans to change the constitution to prolong the presidential term limit.
The ruling party says this is the only sure way to guarantee the country's stability and development.
Speaking during the final campaign rally before the referendum on Thursday, the party's top leadership further claims that foreign interference has played a part in the move.
Eric Biegan is in Bujumbura and comes to us with this report.
Monday marked the end of official campaigns for the referendum that was launched 10 days ago. The country's ruling party, the National Council for the Defense of Democracy, Forces for the Defense of Democracy, CNDD-FDD, held its rally at Bujumbura Circle Epic Gardens to urge its supporters to turn out in large numbers for Thursday's referendum.
This referendum reflects the will and the wishes the people have expressed through the dialogue that had been conducted all over Burundi in a transparent manner.
The referendum has been called largely for review of presidential term limits, which the party has passionately defended.
The term of the president will be no longer for 5 years, it will be for 7 years. Because we have assessed and seen that 5 years are not enough to implement a policy. 5 years is too short to implement and to put in place all the wishes that we promised the population.
Addressing a charged crowd, the party's political bigwigs say the move was arrived at due to what they termed as outside interference that has almost crippled the country.
The colonial powers were not giving time to the elected leaders to achieve what they have promised. The leaders were assassinated, the powers were overthrown, so all those bad events that happened had hands of the colonial power. And
the President Pierre Nkurunziza-led party says the proposed constitution, if passed, will give them the muscle to fight future attempts to destabilize the country.
There were a lot of coups. No president have finished his mandate. So this constitution is there to consolidate and to consolidate the institution elected by the people.
The party's national secretary in charge of communication, Nancy Ninette Mutoni, says a new referendum will seal all existing loopholes in Burundi's laws, which she argues have been used for the detriment of the country in the past.
The constitution that was ruling us was adopted in 2005, was a post-transition constitution. So now we're no longer in post-transition. Burundi is at peace.
Burundi's ruling party says endorsements to constitutional amendments on Thursday will be a vote to a new era of peace and development that every citizen of this country has been dreaming of. Reporting for Channel 1 from Sekre Epic in Burundi's capital, Bujumbura, my name is Eric Biegon.
Biegon doing a fantastic job from Burundi, where the referendum obviously is expected on Thursday as regards the presidential term limit, and we'll be linking up with him this coming days as he breaks these things first. But now a blame game has ensued over the controversial payment of 9 billion shillings by government to acquire land in Ruaraka, whose paperwork was irregular.
Now, the Cabinet Secretary for Lands, Farida Karonei, revealed to the Senate Public Accounts and Investment Committee that the money was paid out cumulatively to acquire land in Ruaraka, but the ministry was not in possession of the title deeds.
This comes as Education Principal Secretary Bello Kipsang, whose docket authorized the payment, blamed the National Lands Commission for sanctioning payment without being in possession of a title deeds.
In yet another twist to the acquisition of land for 2 public schools in Ruaraka, Lands Cabinet Secretary Farida Karonei admitted various government agencies violated the processes of acquiring parcels of land owned by Afrison Exports Limited in Ruaraka.
We have an allotment letter issued by our ministry. We have a government paying for it as private land. We have subdivisions that didn't go. So it's a process that really wasn't undertaken properly. And I think the long and short of it is that the process we followed to pay or to pay for these parcels of land should have been better handled.
Some of the irregular payments made include 2.4 billion shillings paid by General Service Unit for 37.5 acres where its headquarters sit, 750 million shillings paid by Kenya Urban Roads Authority for expansion of Thika Superhighway, and 1.5 billion shillings paid by Ministry of Education for Driving Primary School and Ruaraka Secondary School.
These documents, even from the Attorney General, are referring not to 2, to 1. The title number here is 7879/4.
Yes.
For all the transactions. Remember, the 96 acres were part of the 168. So all these other transactions, the GSU land is paid from this land.
Yes, it is true.
The Kura payments are paid from this land.
Yeah.
The school land is paid from this land. Same reference. So they're not the 2. They divided into 2, but the active piece that where all those payments have been made is reference number 7879/4. The same.
It is true, Honorable Chair, and I will say it again. We should have followed a better process in arriving at these payments. We didn't.
All these payments were done in full, but the government agencies never got the title deeds for the land. Senators grilled the Cabinet Secretary over allotment letters given to the two schools in 1984 by the Ministry of Land, which she said were invalid as the land is private and the owner cancelled the subdivisions. Education Principal Secretary Belio Kipsang blamed the National Land Commission for initiating the processes of acquiring the land at 1.5 billion shillings. The senators put the Principal Secretary to task on why he authorized the payment of the 1.5 billion shillings.
In the said report, the team was of the view that the company had surrendered a portion of the land for public utility and therefore no basis for compensation. In the correspondence availed, we note that there was a letter of allotment issued to the secondary school. That is the opinion of the Attorney General. Now, that being the opinion, and coupled with this report, Bona PS, then somebody, still in the name of the ministry, goes ahead with that information and releases 1.5 billion of public funds and goes ahead to claim in this year's budget that there should be a further and final payment of 3.2 billion, of 1.7 billion, to make a total of 3.2 billion.
We wrote to the National Treasury telling them we are just bringing you the attention of this letter of the National Land Commission, but we have written to the Attorney General to give his legal opinion.
The senators have now demanded documents from 1984 to establish why the Ministry of Lands issued allotment letters to the two public schools, and 34 years later, the National Land Commission nullified the allotment letters. Kevin Washira, Chanoa News.
That story by... Go ahead.
Well, that story brings us to our first break on Channel 1 News. And of course, tonight, we'll quickly remind you of our opinion poll question before John Jacob Curia comes back with perspective. And we're asking you, should those adversely mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside? Should those mentioned in the alleged NYS scandal step aside?
22162 is our SMS line. On Twitter at KBC Channel 1. J Curia at Kato Achenga. Send us your responses. We'll be sampling them at the tail end of this newscast. But for now, we take a breather. When we come back, we engage government spokesman Eric Kiraide.
Je, waweza fanya nini kwa dakika 4? Unaweza piga chef? Kila kitu ni mega. Waweza pika ugali? Pesa hapa ni mega. Labda waweza fua nguo? Ama unaweza tengeneza milioni 30. 4 minutes are enough to win big with Mega Dollar. Just go to Lipa na M-Pesa, select Pay Bill, enter business number 295888, enter account name KBC, deposit 10 shillings or more, enter your PIN and press OK, then choose 10 numbers from 1 to 80 and send to 29588. And you can win up to 30 million shillings every 4 minutes. Deposit, play and win with Mega Dollar. The big game for big winners.
This week on KBC Channel 1.
Why should you say we have a 1/3 rule? If you have that burning desire, that passion, just think of it. Every time when you want something and you want it real bad, do you care if there is any rules? No, you go for it and you go for it hard. Now, there is no need for the 1/3 rule.
And who are you?
I'm trying to kidnap me. No. No, help! I'm being kidnapped! Help! Help! Help!
Welcome back. You're watching Channel 1 NewsHour. Now, tonight in our conversation with the government spokesman, that is spokesman Eric Kiraithe, you're focusing on disaster preparedness in the country in light of the Solai tragedy that has so far claimed the lives of 46 people, and you're also looking at the tragedies happening in Tana River as well as other coastal counties, but also be looking at the state of the fight against corruption. Let me just welcome Eric Kiraithe. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and let's have this conversation. Let's start with the tragedies that have hit the country and start with Solai. And my question would be, does the government or has the government ever had a strategy to deal with disaster?
Yeah, certainly, sir. Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers. The government has a very clear strategy to deal with disaster. It's an old strategy. For example, if I give you an example of the current trends, government departments, especially national government departments in liaison with the county governments, have been working around the country doing a lot of things, looking at the infrastructure in areas where it has been damaged, looking at how many bridges have been washed away. A lot of bridges have been washed away. In one county alone, like Nyeri, they are counting 45, 46 bridges of access road to villages and all that. In Turkana, in Korea, in Kwale, and all these other places, there are very many areas where people have been affected by floods. The government has also been carrying out a survey of areas with a potential for disaster and taking appropriate action. Even if the action is as little as the chief putting somebody from Nyumba Kumi in a village path, so that children going to school, that person can advise on water levels. So the government has been doing a lot. It's only that maybe people do not understand what disaster preparedness is all about. In case of Solai, we must start from a very unfortunate premise. The frame of reference is that so far we have lost some 45 lives, and we are not sure whether that is the final figure. A lot of people have been misplaced. A lot of families, their property, they have been totally dispossessed by the water. And therefore, this is a disaster of higher magnitude. But we must be able to give it to the government in that what Kenyans don't realize, the units dealing with disaster preparedness is not one unit maybe in Nairobi, which is mobilized to move to a place of disaster, because if there is a disaster in Tana River or in Nanyuki or in Samburu, by the time these people reach there, the disaster will not be controlled, because the action when a disaster strikes is to mitigate the human suffering. And
let me cut you short, because this
to
is
save lives. I'll take you through a process so that you understand.
Yes.
So the government disaster management plan incorporates the government services in that particular area. In case of Solai, we had NYS, who have a big camp in Gilgil. We have the KDF, who are also in Gilgil and Nakuru. We have the National Police Service, and all these units actually responded almost immediately. Even the earliest photographs coming as early being taken before daybreak, it was clear that people were on the ground. Government agencies were on the ground.
And that's what I want to ask Bona Eric, because the question is, you say that the government was able to respond in time, and this time you're talking about agencies affiliated with the national government. But the reports we have is that it is the county government that responded very quickly, and number one, inefficiently so. And at one point in the middle of the night, the operation had to be called off because of what you would call darkness. Would you call that preparedness in terms of handling disaster?
Well, I don't know especially what your expectations are. What you must realize is that a disaster like the breaking of the dam does not give you advance notice. That is one. The second thing you must understand in the scene of any disaster, the procedures are that make safe, so that you don't get people getting into the disaster zone and adding on to the number of casualties. Once you have established the safety of the environment, then you move on to save lives by assisting those who are injured, evacuating those who can be evacuated. The other activities follow in that sequence. The responsibility for disaster response at any locality in this country is that of the county government. But we don't leave it to county government or apportion responsibilities, who did what first, who moves faster. Is that you move the people you have to the site. Once those people are at the site, they assess the needs. There is a very high likelihood that I have not followed the sequence, that as more teams arrived in the scene, trained personnel at night arrived, and maybe, I don't know, asked, how safe are we with this operation at this point in time? That meant going back to the dam and assessing whether there is still hazard pending to happen, whether there is another wall to break. You remember that all the firemen, the policemen who responded to 9/11 in New York lost their lives. That is not what disaster response includes. And therefore, without seeming to give excuses, maybe something could have been done better. Maybe from this disaster and its management, we shall be able in future to have an inventory of basic tools like emergency lighting. But remember that I don't see that lighting they could have had at night, and the helicopters are not very useful during the hours of darkness, so that they could have been able to access and make safe. And therefore, from where I am seated, I have not yet benefited from any review, even an interim one, of what exactly transpired, the times the response was made, who responded with what. But I can tell you from a national government perspective, we must give it to the governor and his team in the county. We must give it to the security services, and we must give it to the citizens in that area, because a lot of them provided a lot of accurate information, so that when the first responder arrived, they were useful.
All right. What is your assessment so far as government in terms of this Solai tragedy? Because 46 lives lost. There have been, hearing things flying around. That number one, that dam was illegal, and the owner of this dam has several other dams around the same area. What is your assessment so far as government?
Well, what I can tell you, and I will have to be very frank with you and with Kenya, is that certainly there has been a policy. Prior to Wednesday, all the emphasis was, and must still remain, all this water flowing, and tomorrow it is in Indian Ocean. Let's try whatever we can do to trap it. Over the years, owners of big ranches, those people who do large-scale agriculture, horticulture, have tried. They are all over the place. I am one of those Kenyans who has traveled a lot in large-scale farming areas like Kipia, Washington, Nakuru, and these very dry areas. There have been a lot of even local community efforts to build dams. Others are being assisted by NGOs with very little resources. Now, the actual construction and the process has not been in the issue. The communication I saw about the legality or otherwise was actually emanating from a complaint from the people that this man could have blocked streams which would otherwise feed his neighbors. But he has been trying to do a lot to mitigate that. And therefore, let us wait for the investigations which were ordered very fast, which are being done very impartially and objectively, so that we see if the standard of dams is poor, we have a policy and somebody becomes accountable. If it is out of criminal negligence of Patel, then somebody takes responsibility accordingly. But that, let us not pass a value judgment before the engineers even told us. And let me tell Kenyans that disasters will happen, but let them not happen because somebody neglected to do what they had done. Like now, I would have expected, and the government expects, every county security team to team up with the experts in all the departments, to team up with the county government, and look at every area where water can cause death. All right. So that this water remains a blessing.
Let's go back to Solai, and without getting to the criminal culpability of Patel or not, but it's quite a huge thing for you to admit there was a policy lacuna, or there could be a policy lacuna. But as we talk about a policy lacuna, you realize 46 lives have been lost. Is the government planning to compensate these families?
Well, sir, when it comes to compensation for acts of God, the government will do everything within the law, everything within the regulations, everything in its responsibility. Remember, there are breadwinners there. Remember, there are orphans here, to ensure that every Kenyan who was affected by the tragedy will get education, will be able to get medical. Let us not concentrate on matters of compensation, because nothing can compensate human life. Yeah, let's not think about money all the time, but everything will be done, and where legally compensation is appropriate, then it will be done. But the focus of the government is a return to normalcy, alleviating the suffering of those who lost breadwinners, those who lost houses. And don't ask me why it has taken too long to build back the houses. If I asked you how much is required today to build those houses, you wouldn't know. So the government officers are on the ground looking at every reasonable effort to ensure that no citizen continues to suffer out of this disaster or any other disaster.
And that involves Tana River and other counties that are affected by
involves the entire country.
All right. Yes. Let's get to this alleged scandal at the NYS. 10 billion shillings. The country doesn't appear to have so much faith that the government can do anything, simply because there was a 1.8 billion shilling scandal. Josephine Kabura is still walking.
Well, I wish the government could pick these guys and take them to committee.
But Eric, your government?
What I am telling you is that as a government, we have not gone for those investigations today. The investigations have been going on for quite a while now. Quite a bit of progress has been made in that direction. What I would want to tell Kenyans is that the government of President Uhuru Kenyatta is getting very irritated and getting very impatient with people who are employed in public service and who decide to steal public funds. Let us wait for these investigations to be concluded. What we expect as a government is that so far the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Director of Criminal Investigations are doing a good job. We hope that immediately they conclude the investigations. I don't know on what authority you are talking about 10 billion. That
is why I use the word alleged.
People will be found culpable and are taken before court. Let us see the vigor we have seen our judiciary capable of in dispensing of this matter. One, to recover public funds, because if indeed 10 billion was stolen, a quarter of that money can make life very normal in Solai. It can also build 1 or 2 more dams so that we don't continue donating water into the Indian Ocean. It can go into our big 4, and priority should be recovery of lost public funds and then punishment of those who stole. And let us not be bogged down in theories about criminal justice, in capacity for litigation, so that we continue frustrating the public. I think everybody, every institution must appreciate at the position at which Kenya is today in terms of unemployment, in terms of our housing, in terms of food security, and appreciate that any theft of public fund should be dealt with swiftly, and the punishment and action thereof should be deterrent.
Very quickly, because we need to give room to business, and the question we're having tonight, because the president has had a very strong stance against corruption, and what so far is in model democracies or in other jurisdictions, once a scandal as this, even if it is alleged, a scandal of such magnitude, the people mentioned resign from office immediately to allow room for investigations. Is it probable, or is it okay that people should continue being investigated while they still hold public office?
Well, for a fact, you and I don't even know who exactly is being investigated.
But there are people being investigated.
And pointing fingers, I don't want to ask you whom do you have in mind, but let us believe that the investigations will be concluded. Let us have trust in our investigative agencies. Let us also have trust in our judiciary, and let us not believe that any time somebody comes out and says 10 billion has been stolen, that 10 billion has been stolen. Investigations are going on, action is being taken. The cabinet secretary concerned, Kobia, has made her own statement. The PS in charge has made her own statement. Other people have cooperated fully, including the Director General NYS, have completed fully with every demand and request from the investigating arms, and therefore let us not rush to condemn anybody unheard.
All right. Eric Rede, always a pleasure to engage you, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, that's just where we put a cap on the interview tonight, but be sure we shall continue to engage other stakeholders, including government, from where Eric Rede comes from, that we are able to understand these issues, and most importantly, again, the interest of the Kenyan public. Regina Manyara Gitao is up next with business.
Every 4 minutes is a chance for you to win big with Mega Dollar. Just go to Lipa na M-Pesa, enter paybill number 295888, account name KBC, and amount from 10 shillings or more. Then select your 10 numbers from 1 to 80 and send to 29588. You can win up to 30 million shillings. Start playing now and win. Mega Dollar. Big winners every 4 minutes.
What is this disease called cancer? What is this disease that knows no color, race, age, or social standing?
It's true, they are bad. And it's not only X-rays that are bad. In our homes, we have microwaves, radios, TVs, and they are all emitting a type of radiation, what we call electromagnetic radiation. Even the mobile phone that you keep on holding on to all the time, that mobile phone can actually cause some type of cancer.
This week on KBC Channel 1.
Why should you say we have a 1/3 rule? If you have that burning desire, that passion, just think of it. Every time when you want something and you want it real bad, do you care if there is any rules? No, you go for it and you go for it hard. Now, there is no need for the 1/3 rule.
Trying to kidnap me. No, help! I'm being kidnapped! Help! Help! Help!
On Tuesday 24th, the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Choi, led the National Assembly in paying tribute to the late Baringo South Member of Parliament, Honorable Grace Kipchoim, who passed away on the 20th of April.
Honorable Grace Kipchoim fought a very, very tough battle, being diagnosed with cancer.
This lady was such a social character that many of us will agree with me on that.
So ni time yetu sisi kama wabunge kuhakikisha kama ni motion ni bill tupitishe, watu watibiwe vizuri.
Good evening, glad you're still watching KBC Channel 1 News Hour. Now we speak matters business. I'm Regina Manyara Gitam. Now Kenyans will pay more for petroleum products this month as higher cost of crude oil drives up pump prices. In its latest monthly review, the Energy Regulatory Commission has increased a litre of super petrol by 34 cents, diesel is up by 78 cents and kerosene has been increased by 1 shilling and 50 cents.
The cost of crude oil has been increasing in recent months and is selling at $77.35 from the benchmark Brent crude oil. In its latest monthly review, the Energy Regulatory Commission indicates that the cost of crude oil rose $5.80 to $71.90 per barrel, meaning that consumers should expect higher pump prices in the coming months. Despite the shilling strengthening against the dollar by 61 basis points to 100.54, higher cost of crude oil fueled an increase in petroleum products. This has pushed up the pump price, with a litre of super petrol increasing by 34 cents, diesel is up 78 cents, and kerosene has been increased by 1 shilling and 50 cents. Fuel will be cheapest in Mombasa, where a litre of super petrol will retail at 103 shillings and 88 cents, diesel at 95 shillings and 35 cents, while kerosene will retail at 75 shillings and 44 cents. In Nairobi, super petrol will retail at 107 shillings and 17 cents, diesel at 98 shillings and 64 cents, while kerosene will retail at 78 shillings and 22 cents. Fuel will be most expensive in Mandera, where a litre of super petrol will cost 120 shillings and 98 cents, diesel at 112 shillings and 45 cents, while kerosene will retail at 92 shillings and 3 cents. Judith Akolo, Channel 1 Business.
Now, the cooperative movement leaders have opposed an amendment to the Cooperative Act that introduces social impact members whose main agenda will be to source for finance using SACCO assets without the approval of members. Cooperative Alliance of Kenya Director General Daniel Marube says the social impact members category contradicts the principle of economic participation, where members contribute to build SACCOs and might expose SACCOs to financial risks.
Since last week, members of the cooperative movement have been angered by a proposed amendment to the Cooperative and SACCOs Bill to introduce a new category of members to be known as social impact members, who will not be required to make any monthly contributions or registration fee. And today, the cooperative movement voiced its displeasure with the amendment, warning that if the bill is passed in its current form, it will expose cooperatives and SACCOs to financial risks.
There is no definition of who is this called a social impact member. And when he comes into our books, they are, we have an entry fee, a registration fee. They are exempted from being registered. So we cannot be able to recognize whom they are. We cannot do due diligence on this social impact member.
We're against what we call the social impact members, who are supposed to join their SACCOs through a resolution, yet they are not supposed to actually pay anything to be members. At the same time, make decisions on behalf of
the SACCOs.
They argue that the new category of members could expose members' savings to above, since social impact members will be given powers to form companies within cooperatives and use members' savings as collateral for borrowing without the approval of members.
But they are supposed now to come in and form kind of companies within the cooperatives, use the cooperative deposits and the resources of members as collateral to go and get funding from elsewhere. And when they use this money for businesses, whatever profits they make, it will be shared among the social impact members.
The cooperative movement leaders called for close supervision from the national and county government to protect depositors from pyramid schemes posing as investment SACCOs.
Now, the government has formed an 11-member task force that will advise the government on drafting of Sharia-compliant laws and policy framework to regulate Islamic financial products. The National Treasury Chief Administrative Secretary Nelson Gishuhe says that this will help the country tap the huge unexploited market for the Islamic financial products.
Despite financial inclusion in Kenya standing at an impressive 75%, most of this is driven by mobile money. This has kept policymakers busy thinking about ways to further deepen financial inclusion outside mobile money. One way is tapping Islamic financial products that has been on the cards for several years now. The government has formed an 11-member task force to drive the formulating and drafting policies on Sharia-compliant financial products.
The task force will help develop policies and guidelines for the use of blockchain technology in relevant fields, including the Islamic finance in this country.
The Treasury believes Islamic finance presents untapped opportunity that should be tapped.
Currently, Islamic finance has been identified as one of the areas in which this region can establish itself as a competitive hub.
Field is still opportunity for more. This coverage of 20%, we want to push it up to 50, 80%, and so on. And we believe that the introduction of Sharia-compliant retirement benefit schemes could be one of the vehicles that we can use to bridge this coverage gap.
The Islamic finance market accounts for 1% of the total global assets.
Well, it's a wrap as far as business matters are concerned. Catherine Cheng is on the other side of the studio getting ready with what has been happening in the sporting arena. I'm Regina Manyara Guitar. Do have a pleasant evening ahead.